She attempted to undermine him on live television. What was his reply? It altered everything. The email was received in the late afternoon. A succinct, formal communication from the producers of the Morning Exchange, one of the most widely viewed talk shows in the nation. They intended to include Darius Bell, the CEO of Innovis, and a tech entrepreneur, as a guest on their forthcoming segment on business diversity. Darius had previously witnessed this theatrical production. A mainstream platform unexpectedly recalls the existence of black entrepreneurs, introducing them for a brief period of acclaim before transitioning to the next top trending topic. However, this was distinct. Innovis was not a new company. They had recently won a multi-million-dollar defense contract by outbidding some of the most prominent names in the industry. That was not a stroke of chance. 2 decades of unwavering effort. Nevertheless, he hesitated before agreeing. There was an uneasiness. Tasha, his assistant, detected his uncertainty. Are you certain that you wish to proceed with this? You are aware of the nature of these programs. They are fond of success stories. However, they are even more fond of demolishing them. Darius reclined in his recliner. I will manage it. Additionally, it has a national reach. I suggest that we listen to their responses. Tasha shook her head as she exhaled. Do not succumb to their manipulation. Although he was aware of the ruse, he nodded in agreement. They were playing chess with the wrong man if this interview was a ruse. Darius arrived at KXNT Studios in Los Angeles, the morning of the interview. The air in the green room was antiseptic and chilly. He was greeted by a young producer, who was scarcely glancing up from her clipboard. Mr. Bell, I appreciate your presence. We will mic you up in 5 minutes. There will be no idle chatter. There is no warm-up. Simply enter and exit, as if conducting a transaction. An assistant powdered his face with practiced indifference as he perched in the makeup chair. The live broadcast of the program was displayed on the wall monitor. A panel discussion regarding celebrity scandals, followed by a culinary demonstration. Afterward, a transition card is presented. Upcoming subsequently, the black tech boom. Is it a result of talent or special treatment? Darius tightened his mandible. In this regard, this was the aspect. However, they were in for a significant surprise, if they believed they had the upper hand. He was unaware of the extent to which they were prepared to go. The Morning Exchange's set was intended to be inviting, featuring gentle blues and golds. The host's chair was situated between the guest's chair and a glass coffee table. Cameras hovered silently, capturing every expression and movement. Darius adjusted his suit jacket as he sat across from Madeleine Royce, the main anchor of the program, a journalist with a proven track record of asking challenging inquiries. She smiled, but it did not extend to her eyes. She began with the name Darius Bell, her voice silky and practiced. Chief Executive Officer of Innovis, a genuine American success story. Darius extended a courteous bow. I am grateful for the opportunity to be with you. She leaned in slightly and flipped through her cue cards. Let us immediately commence. Your organization recently secured a $200 million government contract, surpassing some of the most prominent technology companies. That is truly remarkable. Darius was aware of this activity. Begin by uplifting him. Create the impression that they valued his accomplishments. He responded in a manner that was considered. It was a protracted process, but we persevered. Our security encryption system surpassed that of our competitors. It is as simple as that. Madeleine crossed her thighs. It has been referred to as groundbreaking by some. A subdued silence. However, there have been inquiries from other individuals. Darius maintained his composure. Questions, she read audibly as she took up a card. According to certain industry professionals, Innovis capitalized on federal diversity incentives. Agencies are seeking to diversify their vendor base, which is why companies such as yours have an advantage in these contracts. That this may not have been solely about being the greatest, but rather about fulfilling a quota. It was located there. The genuine cause for his presence. Darius delayed his response for a moment. I have previously encountered that argument. However, it is amusing. When a black entrepreneur achieves success, they are accorded special treatment. However, what happens when a legacy firm, which has been operated by the same families for generations, secures the same contracts? It is not contested by anyone. There was a change in the atmosphere of the studio. The producers exchanged glances off camera. Miss Madeleine maintained her firm stance. Are you implying that your success was not influenced by your race? Darius chuckled and shook his head. Permit me to inquire, was it due to Elon Musk's compliance with a diversity quota that SpaceX was awarded NASA contracts? Was Jeff Bezos's background a factor in his ability to secure government contracts for Blue Origin? Alternatively, should we exclusively inquire about this matter when the CEO bears a resemblance to me? Madeline's expression was scarcely visible. Do you not believe that these diversity programs are beneficial? Darius' palms were folded. They contribute to the leveling of the playing field. However, individuals are unaware that the competitive field was never truly equal. However, Madeline was not yet finished. She had an additional plan in mind. Madeline's smile became razor-sharp, as if a blade were concealed within fabric. She briefly examined her cue cards before returning her attention to Darius. Well, Darius, let's discuss that playing field you mentioned, she said, her demeanor transitioning from one of courteous inquiry to one of a slightly colder nature. You were raised in Birmingham, Alabama, a single mother, public institution. Beginning with nothing, you have steadily progressed. That is truly inspiring. Darius's hesitant assent indicated that he was aware of the direction in which this was headed. Madeline continued. However, there are those who may question how an individual without an Ivy League education or significant family connections can transition from an impoverished neighborhood to securing contracts that billion-dollar corporations are unable to secure. She permitted the inquiry to remain unresolved. The implication was evident. What was your route to this location? Was there a manipulator at work? Darius's head tilted slightly, as if he were attentively contemplating the words he had spoken. It is referred to as work, Madeline. Some of us lack generational affluence or country club networks to rely on, so we construct from the ground up. Madeline gave a slight inclination, as if she were acknowledging his words. However, she seemed to be paying no attention. Nevertheless, she persisted. You must have received assistance along the way, perhaps a mentor, a program, something that provided you with an additional push. Darius discreetly exhaled. Answer: yes, I received assistance by working 3 jobs while pursuing my engineering degree. I was unable to afford rent, so I sought assistance by resting in my office while I developed my initial software prototype. That is the assistance I received. For a brief period, her lips were in contact. The producers, who were situated behind the cameras, assumed a fixed position. Madeline reshuffled her cue cards. However, there are those who contend that black entrepreneurs have more opportunities than ever before. That programs, such as affirmative action, minority business grants, and government incentives, are specifically designed to open doors that were previously closed decades ago. Darius's elbows were resting on his knees as he slightly tilted forward. You know what's amusing? When a black business proprietor achieves success, individuals frequently inquire about the programs that were instrumental in our success. However, no one inquires as to which old money bank provided funding for a white-owned startup. Nobody inquires about the family connections that secured their admission to Stanford, or the golf companion who invested in their company. He contemplated this for a moment, before proceeding. The reality is that success is not distributed through a lottery. In order to secure a seat at the table, individuals such as myself were required to demonstrate twice the level of excellence. A discernible change in the atmosphere of the environment. The subtle tension that arises when an audience realizes that they are witnessing a genuine event. Nevertheless, Madeline did not flinch. Rather, she beamed in the manner of a chess player who believes they have successfully cornered their opponent. That is an intriguing viewpoint, she stated, her voice as flawless as glass. However, we should also consider another factor: perception. She made a modest turn toward the cameras. Darius, you portray yourself as a self-made success. However, let us discuss the public's perception of your narrative. There are those who contend that black entrepreneurs are granted an unwarranted advantage in terms of media attention, that the narrative of triumphing over adversity is more appealing than the thousands of white business owners who work just as diligently but do not receive the same attention. Darius quietly chuckled. Oh, so we are now receiving an excessive amount of attention. Madeline maintained her refined smile. However, a minor alteration in her posture revealed her identity. She was not anticipating his laughter. You are informing me that the root of the problem is that individuals like myself receive an excessive amount of attention in a world where 90% of Fortune 500 CEOs are white men, and major tech funding continues to be overwhelmingly allocated to white-owned startups. A wayward strand of hair was placed behind Madeline's ear. I am merely emphasizing that in the current environment, there is a sense of pressure to emphasize diversity over pure merit. Darius shook his head as he exhaled. Merit. Correct. He briefly observed the cameras before returning his attention to her. I would like to inquire about something, Madeline. Do you truly believe that I would be seated in this chair at this moment, if I were not exceptional at my job? Her lips slightly parted, but he continued to walk before she could respond. Do you believe that I am here because I exploited my diversity, or do you believe that I was able to enter despite the numerous measures that were intended to prevent me from doing so? The silence in the room was more intense than any of her previous inquiries. However, Madeline was not yet finished. Not yet. Because she had one final card to play, the one that was intended to derail him. Madeline exhaled slowly, adjusting her position in a manner that appeared unassuming. However, Darius observed a fissure in the facade. She briefly examined her cue cards before placing them down. She desired to convey the subsequent section in a forthright manner. Darius, she said, angling her head slightly, I believe it is reasonable to assume that you are enthusiastic about this matter, and I have the utmost respect for that. However, I would like to inquire about something. Darius waited with a faint inclination. She paused, allowing the words to settle. Do you believe that some of this outrage is exaggerated? Indeed, your success story serves as evidence that the system is not as unfair to black entrepreneurs as some assert. The temerity. Darius could sense the heat crawling up his spine, but he refrained from revealing it. Rather, he chuckled quietly and shook his head. You know, he said, his voice measured, it's amusing how people love to use one success story as proof that a problem doesn't exist. Madeline's smile remained unwavering. However, her eyes were alight with a glimmer. Darius's forearms were resting on his knees as he slightly tilted forward. Let me put it this way. Do you point at a single individual who emerges from a burning building and say, see, the fire was not as severe as I had anticipated? Madeline opened her mouth, hesitated, and then closed it. Darius was not yet finished. The mere fact that I succeeded does not imply that the system is not flawed. It simply signifies that I exerted twice the effort to overcome it. The words he spoke were allowed to settle. The studio staff had also ceased to operate. Madeline adjusted her position in her seat, striving to produce a composed response. I comprehend your viewpoint. However, let us explore an alternative perspective on this matter. She slightly turned her face toward the cameras, and her voice assumed the meticulously impartial tone that is employed for damage control. She continued, some may argue that your frustration is not primarily related to race, but it pertains to resentment toward larger corporations. In the past, you have publicly criticized large technology companies for their failure to recruit a more diverse pool of executives. Darius inclined his head. Does resentment exist? False. Responsibility. Without a doubt. Madeline's lips were mashed together for a brief period. Subsequently, what is your response to those who assert that success in the contemporary economy is contingent upon hard work rather than race? Darius exhaled through his nose, and then fixed his gaze on her. This concluded the matter. He began by stating, the moment I say that people love to believe in fairy tales, when they're the ones benefiting from them. The set was enveloped in a moment of silence. The type of silence that endures. However, let us remain realistic, he maintained, his intonation unwavering. The rate of loan denials for black entrepreneurs remains twice that of white business owners. We continue to receive less than 2% of venture capital funding, and despite the fact that we demonstrate our capabilities, we are still questioned as to whether we merited our success. Madeline remained seated. She was listening, but she was not necessarily hearing. Darius stated, let us cease to deceive ourselves that the system is not corrupt. His tone was composed yet authoritative. It is, and the only individuals who are unaware of it are those who benefit from it. Silence. Pure, oppressive silence. The producers refrained from transitioning to commercials. The control room refrained from intervening. This was uncooked. Madeline's expression became increasingly uneasy as she made a modest adjustment. She opened her mouth to speak, but Darius was not yet finished. Due to the fact that this was the moment that would cause the nation to shake dramatically, Madeline briefly glanced at the off-camera producers as she cleared her voice. However, there was no rescue on the horizon. She had entered this, and now she was obligated to sit in it. Darius adjusted his watch, allowing the silence to persist for an appropriate amount of time to induce discomfort. Subsequently, he reclined in his chair and exhaled. "Are you aware of the genuine issue?" he inquired, his voice becoming somewhat more subdued, yet still substantial. Madeline hesitated. "What?" However, Darius did not flinch. "The location of the bar varies for each individual." She made a minor movement. "What does it all mean?" "I mean," Darius explained, "even a white man of average ability can achieve success in this country. However, in order to secure a shot, a brilliant black man must navigate through blazing hurdles." Off camera, a producer muttered a profanity. They were aware that this was gaining traction. Darius persisted in his endeavors. "A white CEO has the ability to bankrupt a company, lay off thousands of employees, and subsequently secure employment elsewhere. In the interim, a black CEO experiences a single unsuccessful quarter, which is subsequently interpreted as evidence that we were not prepared for leadership." Madeline attempted to respond, but he had not yet finished. "And the best part," Darius chuckled dryly, "is that when we actually succeed, individuals such as yourself sit across from us and inquire whether we have a special advantage." Silence. Madeline's mandible contracted. The camera captured it, despite its subtlety. Darius' posture was slightly forward. It was not aggressive, rather it was firm. "This is the ultimate word. You expressed a desire to discuss fairness." He exhaled a gentle bitter snicker. "Subsequently, we should commence by offering the truth." Another moment of silence, but this one was distinct. It was no longer a source of distress. Impact was the term. The expression of Madeline had undergone a change. The audience was not the only one who was currently observing Darius. It was the entire nation. Then the moment. Darius turned slightly, and gazed directly into the camera. "I am aware of the thoughts that some of you are currently experiencing," he stated. "A number of you are nodding in agreement, as you have witnessed or experienced this." He permitted his gaze to remain fixed. "And some of you are sitting there, arms crossed and frowning, telling yourself that this is not real, that I am merely playing the victim, that it is all in my head." For a brief moment, his lips were in contact before he concluded. "However, what is the truth? You are aware that I am correct." The laboratory was devoid of sound. No one exhaled. Afterward, "All right, we should take a brief break." Over the speakers, the producer's voice crackled. A smile of politeness was coerced from Madeline. "We will provide additional information following this." The cameras malfunctioned, but the harm had already been done. Clips of the exchange were widely disseminated within an hour. However, the genuine tempest was only just commencing. The video caused a significant impact on social media. Darius's screen was inundated with notifications, missed calls, and texts by the time he reached his vehicle. Twitter was in a frenzy. Darius Bell has recently disclosed the media's prejudice regarding live television. This was amazingly potent. #Truth hurts. The manner in which he gazed into the camera and addressed the United States caused a dread. Additionally, Darius Bell was correct. However, not all individuals shared this perspective. Once more, we are at it. Another individual who is effective is feigning oppression. Weep uncontrollably. Abandon the victim mentality. Impressive. This individual has just demonstrated why individuals are hesitant to employ activists. Play the race card all you want, but diligent work is more persuasive. Merit is significant. It was reported by cable news within an hour. He was referred to as brave. He was referred to as combative and furious by others. The morning exchange issued a meticulously crafted statement by lunchtime. Diverse perspectives and frank dialogue are highly regarded. Despite the fact that the discussion today was more intense than anticipated, we remain steadfast in our dedication to having fair conversations. Upon reading it, Darius burst into laughter. That is accurate, correct. Tasha, his assistant, contacted him, her voice a mixture of exasperation and laughter. Are you aware that you have inadvertently damaged the internet? Darius massaged his temple. That was not entirely my intention. Well, congratulations. You have recently become the most widely discussed entrepreneur in the United States. He refrained from responding. He was aware of the subsequent events. Due to the fact that viral instances are not fleeting, they are transformed into battlefields, and the subsequent 48 hours were about to become chaotic. However, this was no longer solely about him. The narrative had expanded beyond the confines of social media by the following morning. On live television, cable news anchors engaged in a debate regarding the matter. Every significant publication was inundated with opinion articles. There was a perspective for everyone. Fox News: is Darius Bell the new embodiment of corporate entitlement? CNN: the reckoning of America's meritocracy. Darius Bell's viral moment. Business Insider: the insights of Darius Bell's interview on success and race in the United States. In the interim, Madeleine Royce was engaged in damage control. The following morning, she delivered a meticulously rehearsed response during her program. I hold Mr. Bell in high regard for his achievements. However, I remain steadfast in my inquiries. As a correspondent, my responsibility is to inquire about the audience's thoughts. If my inquiries cause discomfort, it serves as evidence of their necessity. Translation: she was not conceding. Darius observed from his office, shaking his head. Tasha was situated across from him, perusing her correspondence. You know, she stated, we have recently received an abundance of new investor inquiries. Individuals are eager to collaborate with us. Darius grinned. Maybe the same individuals who neglected us last year. Tasha shook her head. I assume that being controversial is advantageous for business. However, the experience was not entirely positive. A number of clients withdrew. A significant corporate associate abruptly decided to reassess their obligations. Then the assassination threats began. Emails, phone calls, and even an unmarked parcel left outside Innovis headquarters. A single sheet of paper with a single word written in bold is all that is contained within. A sufficient amount. The message caused Tasha to scowl. You require protection. Darius rubbed his temples as he exhaled slowly. He was aware that this would occur. This is the consequence whenever a black man speaks too boldly or unapologetically. However, there was no alternative to back down. He was now faced with a decision. Would he allow the outcry to muzzle him, or was this merely the inception of a more significant event? Darius sat in his office, gazing at the city skyline through the floor-to-ceiling windows. The previous 72 hours were characterized by a flurry of activity, including praise, backlash, threats, and opportunities. He contemplated his youthful self, the Birmingham native who was compelled to contend for every inch of success. The individual who observed doors close in his face, while others passed through without knocking. And now, he found himself at the epicenter of a national debate that he had never requested, but one that he was unable to disregard. The expression of Tasha was unintelligible as she entered. We have recently received an offer. Darius raised his eyebrow. From whom? She placed a folder on his desk. A network. They are interested in having you participate in a television special. One-on-one in-depth discussion regarding the system, business and ethnicity. Darius inhaled. Consequently, they are now interested in listening. Tasha's lips curled upward. It appears to be the case. Subsequently, what do you wish to accomplish? He reclined in his chair, contemplating. He had the option to withdraw, allow the disturbance to subside, return to your duties, or he could capitalize on this opportunity, not for the purpose of gaining influence. I am not seeking attention, however, to express the opinions that were not well received. Darius retrieved the folder and perused the proposal. Then he placed it down. He gazed at Tasha. Inform them that I will handle it. Her eyes slightly broadened. Are you certain? He agreed. Indeed. However, on my terms. Because he was certain to control the narrative, if the system was going to place him under the spotlight. Darius Bell's viral moment was not merely another internet controversy. A reckoning was in order. It prompted a discussion that had been avoided for decades, about race, achievement, and the individuals who are granted the opportunity to ascend without question, as well as those who are questioned when they do. He was referred to as an activist by some. He was referred to as egotistical by some. Some referred to him as right. However, one thing was certain. He could no longer be disregarded by anyone. Therefore, what are your thoughts? To achieve success, is it necessary to adhere to the regulations of a dysfunctional system? Alternatively, does it entail the complete revision of the regulations? Please inform us in the remarks section. Additionally, if you are of the opinion that additional narratives of this nature are required, please consider subscribing.